All right, sounds like we're in business. Good day, everybody. I'm going to pull up my life cycle review, and before I do that, I just wanted to remind you guys, the last two recordings have been Fact Finder appointment recordings, and we really want to make sure that in that Fact Finder that we are using that Fact Finder to build credibility and plant seeds for future ideas and strategies. We definitely want to be, kind of taking little digs at their current planning, but we're not really going to go into the detail that we're going to be going into today about blowing stuff up and really having them realize what a horrible path they're on. We always want in that first meeting, if we could, to get the insurance underwriting started. Find out what their overall plans are for this estate plan that they may or may not have. You don't need to get specifics, but just find out if they have one or not and what it is. And then, of course, we're going to learn to sell off the tax return in that first meeting. The second meeting, which is the model review meeting, which we'll do today, is the retirement projections, blowing up the islands, talk a little bit more about exit strategies and tax assumptions. I'm going to be using the calculators a little more today. I'm going to be using the internet. I'm going to go on Google and Google some stuff for them. And then I'm going to probably leave them with some brochures. I'm probably not going to go over specific products right now, and it makes me a little bit nervous because the products change so regularly. But I may, send them off. Well, in fact, almost always I'll send them off in that second meeting with an equity index brochure of some sort so they can read about it. They may come back and have a bunch of questions, and they may come back and be ready to go. So it may vary pretty greatly, but I would say 75% of the time they take the thing back and they're ready to go when they come back in. 25% or a quarter of the time they come back and they got a ton of questions, or they don't like annuities, or they need some explanation, whatever, and that's totally fine. All right, and then of course at the end of this we're going to sign and submit those insurance applications and get that process, continue that process along, and then we'll be tabling the insurance stuff. We really won't be talking about insurance strategies or insurance solutions at all. Okay, not at all. So let's go ahead and pull up our life cycle model for training purposes today. And I have one here that was an actual client that I did with an advisor, one of you guys. And there's just a lot of stuff on here. These people don't particularly have a lot of money. They're not wealthy, but they're not poor. They're kind of middle class. They're pretty good savers. They've raised a bunch of kids. The husband makes a bunch of money. The wife doesn't really. She just works part-time. Doesn't make much money, doesn't really have any retirement for herself or anything like that, so that's fine. And we'll just kind of go through here. So I'm sitting with a client, and I've got all their documents in front of me, and we're just going to go right down this page. I'd like to scroll down just a little bit to make sure that everything's complete and accurate. And the other thing you'll see here is whatever the wife makes, she's actually deferring everything. She's able to defer like almost everything that she makes in her 403B. So she's really not taking home any money. The husband has a 401k or some kind of self-employed pension of some sort he's going to match on. He's a contractor, so it's a 401. This number right here is probably based upon his age 62 because he's making too much money for Social Security. So the first thing that's going to kind of jump out at me is something that doesn't seem quite right. Is this has got to be $1,800 a month for age 62. So if it's $1,800 a month at age 62, age 66, it's probably $2,500, and by age 70, it's probably $3,000. So for what we know about Social Security, since I don't have the all this filled out accurately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume at minimum he's not going to take it before 66. So let's just say he's not going to make any less than probably $31,000 a year. All right, that's the first kind of thing I'm going to see. And I may do this in front of the client, I may not. But let's say the client's here and we have a message with it. I think somebody said that they don't see my screen. So I just got a text message. So let me just make sure that... I didn't share my screen. Thank you guys for letting me know. I'm talking all this time, and you guys are just listening to me talk. Thank you guys for letting me know. Perfect. So now I'm fixing everything, so we'll start over again. Everything's already fixed. I'm just going to go ahead and fill out the Social Security number here. Obviously, if the husband's getting 31, the wife's going to get at least $15,500. We know that in general. Okay. One pension for him, nothing for her. Withdrawals from IRAs, that's fine. Total income of 162, that's fine. Okay. So let's go back up again. We'll start since you guys couldn't see my screen, I'm assuming now just for somebody to text me and make sure that they can see it, so that I know we're good. Okay. So why don't we just go ahead and start with the insurance stuff? And this is kind of an interesting discussion. The guy looks like he's paying for his own medical insurance, so he may be partially self-employed. Okay, thanks, guys. He must be partially self-employed because he's paying so much. But one of the things I kind of jumps out at me right here is the fact that they're both probably turning 65 pretty soon. So this medical premium, whatever it is or why they're paying it out of pocket, looks like about $1,500 a month. That's pretty much self-funded insurance. That's going to go down drastically because Medicare is going to kick in. So that's an incredible opportunity to save some money. So we would just want to kind of identify that opportunity early on. And I'm going to ask the guy, hey, what is your overall thought on your medical situation? And he's going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm sure he hates paying for health insurance. And I'm going to say, okay, well, you're aware when you guys turn 65, everybody gets Medicare. You can buy Medicare supplement if you like, but either way, your premium is going to drop drastically, and they probably are aware of that. So we're projecting everything to age 70. So if he saves, I don't know what he's going to save, $4,000 or $5,000. Maybe he'll save $1,000 a month on health, right? So I would like to suggest to him, well, if you're paying all this money for health insurance and Medicare is going to kick in, and even if you buy a supplement, you should still save about $1,000 a month. Do you feel like we should be as diligent at paying yourselves back as you're paying for the insurance company stuff? Do you feel like you should be able to save that money and put more money towards retirement? And just see what they say. The other idea here, medical, vision, everything else. The other idea here is you got some term life insurance, right? Let's say this is 20-year level term, and let's say the term insurance was set to expire at age 70. So he bought it when he was in his 50s, and the kids were in college, and he probably thought, well, gee, I know how much college costs now. If something happens, man, I need to get some insurance. That's not an uncommon thing. But how do you feel about losing all of your insurance? And I know we did the health screenings, and I know we did the medical underwriting, but if there's a way where you can not lose all your insurance, are you open to taking a look at that, especially if that potential opportunity doesn't cost you any more money out of pocket, and see what they say? The other thing, too, is I don't see any long-term care here. And, of course, we're going to ask him, do you have any idea of how you're going to be able to afford quality health care if you're fortunate enough to live long enough to become elderly? Do you know anybody that has needed any type of assisted living, part-time, full-time care in your area? Do you know how much that might cost? So, I've got personal stories that I can share about my aunt and my grandfather and other people that I've known, clients and otherwise. I've got a ton of stories I can share, but I really want to know what their personal experience is. Because they're either going to tell you, oh, yeah, I know exactly what it costs, or they're going to say, nobody in my family's ever needed it. I don't really think it's a big deal. Right. So either one of those answers, you're going to have this discussion with them. We're going to go right into the calculators. I'm going to say, look, I don't know what long-term care is going to cost you down the road, but what I do know is in our area, long-term care costs about $8,000 a month because I've had to pay it for my family. So that $8,000 a month is what, $96,000 a year. And let's say, and I'll ask him, at what rate do you think health care costs are increasing? Because 20 years ago, health care long-term care didn't cost $8,000 a month. It might have cost $4 or $5 or whatever it is. So we know in the future it's probably going to be going up. Let them tell you, number one, if they say, well, I think it's going to cost $5,000, don't argue with them. Just put in $60,000. I'll just do that right now. If they say it's going to cost $5,000 a month, even though it's probably higher than that, just say, okay, fine, $60,000. If they say, well, healthcare increases by 8% a year, put in 8. If they say 4, put in 4. Right? So whatever they want to put in here, it's got to be numbers that they either agree with or come up with. All right? It can't just be you telling them what it is because then there's no buy-in. So let's just use a very conservative example and say, okay, in 20 years, if it costs $60,000 now, let's say, again, I use their numbers even though this is a little low, and let's say the cost of care increased by 5%. 20 years from now, 1 year of care is going to be $160,000. Where's that $160,000 going to come from? Right? So their issue is they've got most of the money in retirement accounts. So if you need $160,000 a year, it's going to come from these retirement accounts down here. Right? He's going to have about $1 million in retirement accounts. So he's got to take out, to get 160, he's going to pull out about 220. right? We've already had the tax discussion with him. He sort of knows that. So what if both of you need care? Even if it's only for a few years each, what is that 220 going to look like? You're going to be pulling out $500,000 a year. How long can your retirement account sustain itself while paying for your care? And again, I'm not giving any solutions today. I'm just going to ask him, and I'm going to have him think about it. I might say, there are opportunities for us to combine life insurance and long-term care into one package. So we get these sort of like using the same dollar twice idea. And some people like that because if you don't actually end up using the insurance, not everybody needs long-term care. We just don't know who's going to need it and for how long, but not everybody's going to. So if you end up needing it, thank goodness we're going to have it. But if you don't end up needing it, wouldn't it be nice for all that money to go back to your family so they can recover everything you've ever put in there, plus interest tax-free? That's probably a decent topic of conversation, right? So we're really telling them, look, if you don't do anything, you're going to lose all your life insurance. So you each got $1 million of term, so that's going to be gone, and you have no long-term care. That's a pretty significant liability. Losing $2 million worth of life insurance and not having long-term care, just say those words out loud to somebody. So you're going to lose $2 million worth of life insurance and without long-term care have a pretty significant liability. How much thought have you given to this? Do you think there might be a way that we can help leverage your assets and create a little more protection for you so you don't lose everything? And then, of course, the survivor, in this case, let's look at the husband here, right? The husband's got a pension. The husband's got larger Social Security. The wife is going to miss out big time, right? I mean, obviously she'll get the survivor benefit for social, but as a couple, the most that she can get usually is half of that pension. She'll lose $27,500, plus she's going to lose her Social Security, 37, so that's 42,000, whatever. So how do you feel about losing $40,000 of your retirement income once your husband passes away without any long-term care protection? Who knows what he needed to spend on long-term care? These are the types of things that you want to point out to people. Again, we're not saying, hey, well, you're an idiot or you need to do this or you really should have thought about it. We're saying, hey, here's some potential pitfalls that we're going to try to avoid. Remember, some of that verbiage and the way that we position things can go a long way in these cases. And of course, he's maxing this stuff out. He's not getting a match. So I can go right in here and say, look, you're going to work another 6 years, and your money is going to grow in your 401k to $530,000. But what if you didn't max this thing out? Right? What if you only put in what you're getting matched? So you put in $11,500 less. Right? If you put $11,500 less and you only put in $11,000, watch this number right here. The 530 is going to go to 448. But you put in 11,500 less for 5 years. So you put in $57,500 less, almost $60,000 less. And you don't have a ton less money here. So not putting that extra money in there is not really going to make that huge of a difference, right? 448, back to your 530. You're not making a whole lot extra money on the other money. Obviously you want to put the money you're getting matched, but does it really make sense for you to put all that extra money into this government-controlled account? And by the time you turn 70, now the government's going to dictate how much you take out and when rather than you. And if the government decides to stick to us and raise taxes, what are you going to do about it? In this government-controlled retirement account, you really don't have a lot of control, or you don't really have a lot of flexibility in what's going to happen to it. I like using the word government-controlled. I just said it like 3 times in a row now to help you realize how important that is. That doesn't sound like a favorable thing when you say government control, right? So I'm really trying to blow up the over idea with this thing. So now the other point of this 401k, and I've done this in the training, you guys remember this, we sort of do the Benjamin Franklin positive and negatives about 401ks versus IRAs, right? The only real, well, there might be more than one, but the only real reason why somebody may want to leave money in a 401k in some states is because it does provide you some type of liability protection if you get sued or get into a massive accident or something else like that. But as far as the fees are concerned, the flexibility, the ability to Roth convert, the control, there's no reason why somebody's going to want to leave this money in their 401k. All right, you definitely want to take that money out of there. And so I might use what we call the $1 million example. All right, and I might just, I don't know if I've got the ability to write on this. I don't think I do. Maybe I do. Annotate your desktop. No, I don't know how to do it. Maybe. Let me try it. I've never done this before. I'm doing it on the fly. Can I do it? Yeah, I can draw little pictures. A P. Yeah, okay, I can draw pictures. This isn't actually what I want to do, though. This is not going to work for me. But what I want to do is I want to do something called the $1 million example. Wow, I'm learning to do stuff every day. I want to do something called the $1 million example, which is what really happens to your $1,000,000. Or having $1 million in a retirement account. So retirement accounts, what does that really do for you? And I've done this before. I'm going to just pull up a very simple Word document so I can illustrate this for you guys. Actually, I'll do it right in the calculator. So it's actually even easier. So $1 million in retirement. Let's say 1. Yeah, let's say you're getting a reasonable rate of return, and you've reached the promised land because you're a millionaire. You're 70 years old, and you want to start taking income, right? And the income you're going to take, like I said, normally is between 4 and 5%. So the RMD is going to be a little bit more than 4%. But I'm going to just go ahead and take out 5%, which is $50,000. And I'm going to say to them, most people will go ahead and start taking out the amount of money where they're pretty comfortable with the fact that their money's not ever going to run out. All right? And forget about fees for a second. I'm not even going to take the fees out of here just yet, but I will in a second. If you take out $50,000 a year out of your retirement accounts when you're 70 because you got $1 million, people typically want to keep their money intact. So if we only take that amount of money out and we get a decent return, we can go to life expectancy and still leave like a bunch of money behind to our families, like $800,000. Right? So that seems pretty good. The problem with this is how much tax are we going to have to pay on this $50,000? Right? So if I put a tax rate on here, let's say you live in Maryland where I am and you're in a 24% bracket plus 6% state. Let's do a 30%. Right? Let's go ahead and do the taxes. So you'll see the taxes coming out of here. Right? So the idea is if you want to net 50, right, you got to take the taxes out of here. You're going to have to make a much more aggressive withdrawal. If you net the taxes out, you would be left with $400,000. Versus $800,000. So you're going to lose $400,000 to taxes over your lifetime, which is a pretty huge deal. Half of all that money essentially is going to taxes. That's a pretty huge deal. But the second thing is, what is $50,000 worth 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? You're 64, so we're talking about 6 years from now. So let's just say 10 years into retirement. What's this actually worth? Well, we've got an inflation template right here. And I might pull this up for them and say, well, I don't know, 16 years from now, what do you think inflation is going to average? Let's say they say 4%. I'm going to say, okay, 16 years at 4%, they've got 53 cents on the dollar. So they've lost almost half of all that money to tax. Lost almost half of all the money to inflation. This is not difficult math, right? So you lose a quarter of this or 30% of this, so you lose $15,000 to $20,000 in taxes, and then you lose another $25,000 to inflation. Have you really thought about this as far as exit strategy is concerned? Was this really your idea of how you want it to work? Part of the problem is our clients, once they realize that inflation and taxes take such a big hit on this thing, they start getting really fearful of spending their money. And they start taking out less and less and less and living on less and feeling poor, even though they're millionaires. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Right? So if we are afraid to spend our money because taxes and inflation and all this other stuff is killing us, what's going to happen to your $800,000 or $900,000 if you die when you're, not 80 and you have 900,000, or you die when you're 90 and you have 900,000 or whatever? Sorry, 900 versus 800. Whenever you pass away, if you want that money to go to your kids, I know you care about your kids. You got these 3 kids here. Let's remind them and show them 3 kids. So we have, child 1, 2, and 3. Maybe some of these kids have grandkids. If you would like to dictate where your money goes, and would you like to control how this money passes on to your kids, you can't do that in a 401k, right? It's all taxable, and in fact, some of it might come out as a lump sum taxable distribution if you don't have your beneficiary set properly, right? Or you want this money to go to your kids. You can't roll over. A kid can't inherit a 401k, right? A spouse might be able to, but a kid can't. In general, the kid can't. So taxes and fees are a huge part of your life, Mr. and Mrs. Jane and John Doe. Let's really start thinking about this a little bit more and seeing if this really makes sense for us to be maxing out all of our money in this bucket that we really don't have a lot of control over. Let's go back here and say, okay, well the last piece of this is the fees. I really want to talk about the fees for a second. And so I showed you the taxes. So without having to pay taxes, without having to pay fees, we're fine, right? But let's say your fee in here is, I don't know, 1.5%, right? So look, here's what shows you the fees coming out here over the years, right? So if you have taxes and fees together, and you still want to take out your 50 grand, look how much these taxes and fees are costing you. If you want to live off, if you want to maintain $50,000 a year, and you have to pay all these taxes and fees, you're going to run out of money. You're not going to leave any money left. Have you really considered how much taxes and fees are really weighing down your performance? And if I can show you a way to reduce these taxes and fees, do you think that might make sense? I can't guarantee you can make any more money, but I certainly can guarantee you get to keep more of the money you make. And I think if we just make a reasonable return just like everybody else, but focus on recovering as much of this $800,000 as we can that was lost in taxes and fees and fight inflation and all these other things that we're now starting to discover, I think that's going to be time well spent. All right, so that's the conversation about how terrible and horrible these retirement accounts are. They know what a Roth is. They've heard about it before, right? They just don't do it. Really, we need to do more. All right, let's talk about Schwab for a second. So let's say your Schwab mutual funds are charging you some fees. I don't need to go over the fees again. We just talked about how tragic fees can be, right? But this is also throwing off some taxable interest. Would you be open to allowing us to turn that Schwab account into a tax benefit for you rather than a tax liability? What if we could switch that Schwab account into something that, rather than causing you taxation, actually helps reduce your taxes? Would you be open to that? All right, that's a real easy conversation. So we're going to go on to the Internet. I got my Google. I should have my Google up. I think my Google might give me a little bit of trouble because I've got this Ready Talk thing going, which kind of slows stuff down. But I'm going to Google, and I'm going to Google the words, as you guys know, C-R-U-T. This is an introduction to something called a CRUT. A CRUT is a charitable remainder trust. I'm going to show you a little bit how they work, and then you're going to research this and come back and let's talk about it some more later on. Okay? So we're just introducing them to the idea today. You can read the Wikipedia definition, which I like. I like the Wikipedia definition down here, and the reason why I like it is because they have an example here, which is awesome. Assume Mr. Smith has $1 million of stock and puts it into a CRUT, and then Mr. Smith selects a 10% CRUT. He'll get $10,000 a year until he dies. At that time, the balance of the trust will go to charity. So we don't have liability here for explaining the strategy because Wikipedia has taken that liability for us. This is their writing. This is what they say, right? And so I like this as a very simple example. I'm not saying they're going to make 10%. I'm not saying anything. I'm saying this is an example of how charitable trusts work. I really like that. What I want to also show them is I want to show them what they call a Crutch Calculator or a CRT calculator. So I'm going to click on the word, I'm going to Google now CRT calculator just like I would with a client, CRT calculator. Take them through this exercise, click on the Trust Calculator, American Heart Association. You guys, some of you have seen me use this before. This is an online tool that your clients can kind of mess around with and use on their own. Right? So we've already talked about insurance. We've talked about how terrible their retirement accounts are going to be if they don't move them. We're just basically saying, hey, you know what? There's a better way here rather than having all your money lost to taxes, fees, and inflation. Well, here is a potential idea. So let's say this guy's got a Schwab account worth $350,000. And I don't have to go into great detail today. I just want to show them what could be a potential solution, right? Let's say 64 years old. I'm not making any recommendations, but look, rather than that $350,000 just sitting there causing you dividends and capital gain tax every year, we'll look at the 1040 to see what it's doing. What if we could turn this $350,000 into a little pension? You know, by the way, your wife doesn't have a pension. Your wife's been a nurse her whole life. You have a pension because you either work for the government or you work for a large company. But what if we set this $350,000 up as a pension for your wife, so you can still, get access to it, but it starts paying you $17,500 a year. Even if you don't need this money, would it be okay if we started generating some extra income for you and you could either save it or reinvest it for the future? Yeah, maybe it's okay for them. And then on top of this, on top of the income, they're going to get a charitable deduction of $152,000. And of course, this number just kind of stares them at the face. I just sit there and have them look at it. And a couple different things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, that's unbelievable," or they're going to say, "How is that possible?" Or they may say, "That's too good to be true." Very, very seldom do they say that's too good to be true. But then we're going to go into the whole discussion about, well, this is how a charitable trust works. Let's play with the numbers. You can do this multiple times. You don't have to put in this amount of money. It's completely arbitrary. You can have a really nice discussion with them about charitable trusts, but have them research it, because you're not going to find a lot of negative information on the internet about charitable trusts. So we're introducing the concept of charitable trusts today. We're getting them to really not want to have their other accounts in retirement and 401k stuff. I know I'm not going into detail on the charitable trust stuff today, but that's because that's not what we're doing today. But introducing them is what we want to do. I want them to reduce and start redirecting this. So you need to stop putting so much money into these government-controlled accounts, because we know you're still going to have the majority of this money in here, even if you don't put so much in. So go back, change your paycheck, reduce what you're putting in to essentially, what is it? About 5% of what you're earning. Maybe 6%, and do that, and then let's go ahead and figure out what type of tax-sheltered accounts we can redirect the excess contributions into. Okay? So these are pretty simple conversations. This case is not super complicated. The Schwab account, maybe we start with a charitable trust of 150 or 200 so that we can make another contribution 5 years down the road. I don't know. But I do know that this is a terrible account. The fees and taxes are going to kill us. Next meeting, when we do the recording, we're going to go into personalfund.com, we're going to go to Yahoo Finance, and we're going to really pick this thing apart. Okay? But let's start a little bit with philosophy and strategy and see if we can get some buy-in. Some clients will be like, "Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, I'm ready to go, let's start doing it." And then you got to put the brakes on and say, "Wait a minute, let me send you some brochures on how to get into some indexes without any fees. Let me show you some brochures on some retirement annuities. Let me show you some brochures on charitable trust idea. We have a quoting and a proposal guide that you can give to your client. They can read about it, and step by step how to set one up." Of course, we want to do it for them. And then the last piece is the debt. Right? I'm looking at student loans. I'm looking at credit cards. I'm looking at car loans. Maybe the cards are 2.9. Maybe the credit cards are at, I don't know, 8.9 or 14 or 10, and the student loan's probably at 7 or 8. So they have a decent amount of equity in their house. I don't know if they're going to move or not, but man, if we can start shoring up some of this ridiculousness, what a difference that could make. So we need to get 22, 32, 42. We need to get 50 grand out. So let's do a new loan for 410. Right? Still well within our 70 to 80% equity range. Let's just get a new loan for 410 and see what the heck we can do here. So new amortization. To be fair, $410,000. We want to pay for our costs. That's why I took a little extra money out. Let's do 4.75. All right. 2139. If their house is worth, $600,000 or $700,000, there's got to be $1,000 of escrows here. So the total payment would be about $3,100. So 21 for principal and interest, 1,000 for taxes and insurance. That's at least in my area, guys. Taxes and insurance are expensive here, right? So $3,100 a month, and right now you're paying 23, 33, I don't know, 38, 9, 41. So it looks like you're going to save them about $1,000 a month. We don't need to get into all the specific details. If they like it, great. If they don't, that's fine too. But how would you like to save about $1,000 a month if we were to re-engineer your debt window here? And then you can put that extra $1,000 a month towards tax-sheltered money, tax-free savings, retirement stuff, all that other kind of good stuff. So all these different planting the seeds, we blew up a bunch of islands, gave them some ideas. This is really the crux of the second meeting. So we're going to do another recording. We're going to go into fees and go onto the internet, do the Yahoo stuff. But I wanted to talk about how we can kind of go back and forth. I use the calculators to verify projections for taxes and fees. I use the calculators to verify long-term care. I use the calculators to do the the debt consolidation. Next time I'll do the random return, sequence of return, all that kind of good stuff. But I think we're in a really good pattern for this particular client. I think we've made some pretty compelling arguments that are sort of difficult to refute for them, and it's a very sort of powerful conversation we have without being pushy or salesy at all. And I think that's going to be a really good thing for us. All right. Thank you guys very much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then I'll open up the floor for any questions.